What's up, and welcome to another edition of Locked On NBA, the biggest stories with the local experts. I'm your host, Jackson Gatlin, also host of Locked On Rockets right here on the Locked On Podcast Network. Today, we'll be chatting with Doug Norrie of Locked On Nets, as the Nets are now losers of 8 straight games and a lot of turmoil surrounding that franchise. We've got part-time Kyrie Irving, Kevin Durant's injury, the potential setback to Joe Harris's injury recovery timetable, and hey, James Harden may or may not make it past the NBA trade deadline as a member of the Brooklyn Nets. But first, quick message from our friends over at Built Bar, because look, this is the time of year that, often I've pretty much given up on New Year's resolutions, right? But not this year. I'm sticking to my resolutions with Built Bar because it's the protein bar that tastes like a candy bar. It is so good, so delicious. Every single bar, low cal, low sugar, high protein, high fiber. It makes it easy to stick to my New Year's resolutions and the flavors that Built Bar has to offer. Oh, so many great options to choose from. Strawberry, mint brownie, peanut butter, cookies and cream, coconut brownie chunk, my personal favorite. You can't go wrong with a single bar on their menu. They're great if you're trying to lose weight. They're great if you're just trying to stay where you're at. And you can check them out. Just visit built.com and use promo code LOCK15 to get 15% off your very next order of the best tasting protein bars on the market. Again, that's promo code LOCK15 for 15% off at built.com. Joining us now is Doug Norrie of Locked On Nets. You can follow at Doug Norrie on Twitter. Doug, man, when it rains, it pours in Brooklyn, apparently. 8 straight losses, now 29-24 on the season. 7th seed in the Eastern Conference, play-in bound, potentially, it looks like. Joe Harris, potentially with an ankle injury, setback as far as that is concerned. Kyrie Irving, still just playing in half the games. Kevin Durant, not expected to be back until after the All-Star break. And James Harden, unhappy in Brooklyn, maybe on the way out. Steve Nash says he's not on the way out. There's so much going on in Brooklyn right now, Doug. I mean, at this point, we got to start with James Harden, because if he is truly unhappy in Brooklyn and has the chance to potentially walk away with this summer, it feels like the Nets are almost in a position where they have to deal him at the deadline or risk losing him for nothing. But then you have Steve Nash turn around and address the media very publicly and say, we are not trading James Harden. So at this point, Doug, what course of action do you foresee the Brooklyn Nets taking as we're walking into the NBA trade deadline right around the corner?
Yeah, man, it's so crazy. Like, we're just at this crazy inflection point that is so hard to discern what actually is true and what isn't. I'll say, Nash comes out and says that they're not trading him. He's pretty definitive in his statement, right? So you have to take him at face value. But you also know that the reporting that came out around the Harden thing is not of the hot take nature. This is like Shams and Woj, and this is sourced, and these guys do not just post hot takes. They post facts, right? Like, they post things that tend to come true. And so this is where you can't, this isn't just some, like I said, some hot take stuff. Like, you have to put some fire with around where the smoke is coming from. So I think that right now, if I had to make a bet, my bet is Harden is a net through the trade deadline, right? So I think that's where I put my money. I wouldn't feel great about it because I don't think the Nash thing is some kind of just, put in pen total law now. She's still not the GM. I'd be shocked if they, weren't having internal dialogue about what's actually happening here. But there's clearly this all cropped up from a certain point of truth, I think, right? It's like that Harden is not happy here. It's not working out the way he thought it was going to be. He knows Daryl Morey. There's lots that you can put together. I think right now I would say he's there through the trade deadline, but I can totally see why it's a thing. And even if he's there through the trade deadline, you have to believe this is going to be a constant source of discontent for the rest of the season, because you can't put some of these things, you really can't put this kind of toothpaste back in the bottle at this point. So I think even if he stays through the deadline, the Nets just have there's like this weird existential crisis they're going through right now about what they are as a team. It's just all downside. You went through the list to start. The list is never ending about all the crap that's gone wrong.
It is just across the board. I'm telling you, it takes up a paragraph on my notes, just to make sure that I've got all my ducks in the row. Just to
almost going to be like, hey, dude, come on. Jeez, it's like piling on at this point, but it's all true.
Right? It's just facts, unfortunately, and that's what the Brooklyn Nets are faced with. But Doug, I mean, at this point, there's so many. I feel like anybody trying to boil it down to any one single variable, right? There's so much nuance here to what's going on with the Brooklyn Nets. But where are you allocating, most of the blame or the frustration for where the Nets kind of find themselves at this point in the season?
Okay, so I think it's actually pretty easy. And I hate to say it like this, it's just incredible bad luck. And I'm actually not like a good luck, bad luck kind of guy in general. Like I just tend to want to deal in probabilities and use numbers as kind of like the basis for a thought process. I will say with the Nets, it is incredible bad luck that where they sit right now. And I'll go through a couple key points. One, injuries have totally unhinged them at just the wrong times. It's been the theme since the big three have kind of come together is they have not been able to stay on the court together all at the same time because they keep getting injured. Even some guys like Harden, who's not necessarily even has not been injury prone. So I think bad luck is there, number one. Two, I think that and I'll actually throw the Kyrie thing into the bad luck category too, because it's bad. Is he kind of a flake? Yes. But is it bad luck that the mandate thing just happened to be in his city, like one of 3 or 4 cities that end up doing this thing? Like that's kind of bad luck. A lot of players have not had this problem that are unvaccinated and continue to play. It's just like it's a New York thing, and that's it's bad, like whatever. And so I think those two pieces combined with the Nets are just built in just the wrong way to be able to survive this kind of stuff happening because they're so top heavy in terms of the big three salaries that it makes it just every time they miss a game, it cascades into the rest of the roster because they just can't make it up in the same way other teams can. If you look at all these other teams that are dealing with players lost, they're not dealing with the massive amount of money at the top. That then what happens is the talent at the bottom is so much more diminished than these other teams that you just can't make up the difference. Because yes, every team deals with injury, but they're not built this way. The only other team that's actually built this way kind of is the Lakers. And we've already seen what's happened with this team when they lose guys. They're also a disaster, right? So like these are the central points of where the Nets problems are. The problem is that from a narrative perspective, that doesn't really play for when the media talks about it, because they're going to talk about the vaccines, they're going to talk about Harden being out of shape, they're going to talk about like the rules, they're going to talk about this other stuff. But it really does, to me, come down to that. It's like they just structure the team in a way that was going to win the championship if the big three are healthy. They're not, / they can't play. And they just aren't. When you're built like that, it's so tough to survive if you have problems. And that's why I said the Lakers are good comp. The Lakers are another one. Like they've underperformed because they've gotten hurt and have had other problems. And when you're a team that's built like that, this is just the problem. So I don't know. I don't know if that answers it, but like that's what I think the core problem is. That's not going to be the media narrative because that's just not that much fun to talk about.
No, but when you look on paper, right, this Nets team was supposed to be like immediate, custom built championship favorites, and that's exactly what the goal was, going all in for trading, the next almost decade worth of picks for James Harden. But Doug, I mean, how rough does that trade look for James Harden if the Nets decide, you know what, we're going to try and stick it out with James, we're going to try and get this situation figured out. They walk into this next summer, and if James bolts for nothing, I mean, that in hindsight's always 2020, but in retrospect, how bad does that trade look for the Nets, man?
It's already looking bad, frankly, and you would do it 10 times out of 10. So I don't think that's, I'm not going to do revisionist history about that. Like you do it every single time, but the results are already looking bad. I don't think he would bolt for nothing because I think they almost have to sign and trade him to like any other team that would want to take on his salary. So there's a world where he doesn't, it's in everyone's best interest to actually sign and trade him. Right. So like, I think that I'm not, maybe for my own just emotional hedging here, I'm not operating in a world of he's going to bolt for nothing because I actually don't know if I can handle it. But this is where if you kind of take the tea leaves around, not the tea leaves, if you kind of like just take a test of where Nets fans are right now, this is actually why a lot of Nets fans have already talked themselves into the Harden trade now, because it hedges against that possibility. And there's some mental gymnastics you can do where it kind of helps the team to do it now and bring in Simmons and bring in like some other smattering of other talent, Curry, Thibault, whatever it ends up being. And I can already see the emotional hedge that's going on around Nets fans because they just don't want that to happen. I don't think he walks for nothing, but I do think that we are close to the off the rails point on this, and it's just going to be tough. It's just going to be such a tough road to hoe, like from now on. Even if he stays, the only thing, there's only one, and this is probably the definitive point here. The only thing that saves it is if they win the championship. Like, and that's it. It's championship or nothing. And there's really no middle. Nothing else can happen. You have, if he stays now, you have to win the championship. Otherwise, it's a massive L almost no matter other way it kind of plays out. So, man, you can hear it. I've been spending all weekend on this. This has been a disaster. It's so bad. It's gone wrong in a historically bad way that I don't think will ever be recreated. Thank God they have KD already resigned on the extension. It's the only thing that kind of gives me solace is that he's in that for the next few years, and he's the one that's going to age a little more gracefully.
A silver lining, however slim, that KD is signed for the next, few years, that he's locked down long term. But I think you summed it up beautifully there, Doug. I think it is championship or bust at this point for the Brooklyn Nets. It'll be really interesting to see how the rest of the season develops. Will James Harden be a Brooklyn Net past the trade deadline? You're going to have us covered for all of that and more over at Locked On Nets. Doug, thank you for stopping by Locked On NBA with me.
All right, Brian. Thanks a lot.